The Silent Life of a Redwood Forest. Ambient Biology Narration for Sleep. Segment 1. Introduction to the Ancient Giants. Welcome to the silent life of a redwood forest. Find a comfortable position, close your eyes if you wish, and allow yourself to drift into the timeless world of Earth's most magnificent trees. This journey will take you deep into a realm where time moves differently, where trees have stood for thousands of years, and where nature whispers in languages older than human memory. Imagine yourself standing at the edge of a vast forest where towering shadows stretch endlessly before you. These are Coast Redwoods, among the tallest trees on Earth, reaching over 380 feet in height. To truly comprehend this measurement, picture yourself standing at the top of a 35 or 40-story building. Now, extend your imagination even higher. The crowns of these ancient giants pierce the sky, their uppermost branches touching clouds that drift across the Pacific coast. The scientific name for these magnificent trees is Sequoia sempervirens, which translates beautifully to ever-living. This name carries profound meaning, for redwoods do not merely live for a human lifetime or even for a few generations. These trees can live for more than 2,000 years. Let that number settle into your mind. 2,000 years. During that time, civilizations have risen and fallen. Empires have crumbled to dust. Wars have been fought and peace has been restored. Yet these trees have stood, growing silently, accumulating rings of wood that tell the story of every single year. The oldest known redwood is estimated to be over 2,200 years old. This means that when the redwood first sprouted as a tiny seedling, the world was in a vastly different era. The Roman Empire was at the height of its power. The great philosophers of ancient Greece were still celebrated in the minds of scholars. And now, in this modern age, these trees continue to stand, having witnessed an incomprehensible span of human history through their silent growth. Beneath the towering giants lies a hidden world of roots spreading horizontally across the forest floor. Redwoods have shallow root systems that spread up to 80 feet in all directions. Rather than driving deep into the earth like many other trees, redwoods prefer to spread wide, creating an expansive network that reaches laterally through the soil. But perhaps more remarkably, these roots intertwine with neighboring trees, forming a supportive network that binds the forest together into a unified whole. Individual trees become interconnected, sharing resources, transferring nutrients, and supporting one another through the centuries. The bark of these ancient trees tells its own story of resilience and protection. Redwood bark can be up to a foot thick, an extraordinarily dense shield of protection for the living tissue beneath. This bark is rich in tannins, complex organic compounds that serve multiple purposes. Tannins protect redwoods from insects that would bore into their wood. They guard against disease-causing organisms that seek to exploit any weakness. They even provide protection from fire itself, allowing these trees to survive catastrophic burns that would obliterate other species. In a sense, the bark is a fortress, a carefully evolved defense system perfected over millions of years of natural selection. Redwoods reproduce in two distinct ways, creating a dual strategy for continuation and survival. They reproduce sexually, growing from tiny seeds that float on the wind or are dispersed by animals seeking fertile soil where they might take root and begin their long journey to the sky. But redwoods also possess an asexual reproductive strategy. Along the base of mature trees, knobby growths called burls form. These burls are not random deformities, but rather specialized structures packed with dormant buds. When circumstances permit, often after a fire or major disturbance, these burls can sprout new trees. In this way, a parent tree can clone itself, creating genetic copies that may grow in a circle around the original, forming what nature lovers call fairy rings or family circles. As you listen to these words, imagine the scale and age of these forests. Forests that have existed since before recorded history, forests that continue to thrive in a narrow strip along the Pacific coast from southern Oregon to central California. These are not isolated trees, but entire ecosystems, interconnected networks of life spanning millennia. Segment 2. The Forest Climate and Atmospheric Dance. The redwood forests thrive in a temperate rainforest zone blessed with heavy rainfall and coastal fog. This climate is unique, shaped by the meeting of warm ocean currents and cold continental air masses, creating an environment perfectly suited to support the world's tallest organisms. The atmospheric conditions here are unlike anywhere else on Earth, creating a microclimate that sustains these ancient giants and the countless organisms that depend on them. Fog rolls in from the Pacific Ocean on nearly every summer evening, transforming the forest into a realm of mist and moisture. The redwoods themselves have evolved an ingenious mechanism to harvest this precious water. As fog drifts through the canopy, the microscopic droplets collect on the needles of the trees. This is not a passive process, but an active harvesting system. The trees create their own rain by capturing fog on their needles, which then drips steadily to the forest floor throughout the night and early morning hours. It is a gentle, constant precipitation that feeds the roots and nourishes the entire forest. The significance of this fog collection becomes apparent during the dry summer months. Fog provides up to 40% of a redwood's water during these periods. This means that nearly half of the water a redwood tree uses to grow, to transport nutrients, to photosynthesize and survive, comes directly from the atmosphere rather than from rainfall or groundwater. Without this fog, these forests would not exist. The fog is not merely a pleasant aesthetic feature, but an absolute necessity for survival in this environment. The forest floor itself tells a story of richness and abundance. The soil is rich in organic matter from decomposed leaves and plant litter. Centuries upon centuries of falling leaves, dying branches, and decaying wood have accumulated to create a substrate of extraordinary fertility. This organic matter is not evenly distributed, but layered in distinct zones. Soil organic matter in redwood forests is about 50% carbon, making them important carbon sinks. The forests pull carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and lock it away in wood, bark, and soil, where it can remain sequestered for thousands of years. In this way, redwoods serve as nature's solution to atmospheric carbon, removing greenhouse gases and storing them in the form of living biomass. Nutrient cycling within the forest happens at a remarkable pace. Minerals are recycled from leaf litter back into the soil, supporting the growth of new vegetation. This cycle of death and renewal is so efficient that the forest seems to create nutrients from nothing, extracting them from the air, from weathered rock, and from the bodies of fallen organisms. Everything connects to everything else in this intricate dance of exchange and transformation. The soil layers tell the history of this forest ecosystem. Subsoils are highly weathered and low in nutrients, the result of millions of years of water percolation and mineral leaching. But the topsoil is rich and dark, packed with organic matter and alive with microbial activity. In areas where redwood forests meet floodplains, the soils are layered and nutrient-rich, deposited by ancient floods that carried sediment from upstream sources. Meanwhile, redwood forests stabilize ridgetop soils, which are old and weathered, preventing erosion and holding the landscape together. The climate-regulating role of the forest cannot be overstated. The forests help regulate local climate by cooling the air and retaining moisture. The dense canopy intercepts solar radiation, keeping temperatures moderate throughout the year. The constant evaporation of water from leaves and soil creates a cooling effect similar to a massive air conditioning system. The forests influence local weather patterns, creating their own microclimates that are subtly different from the surrounding regions. In microclimates like these, temperature can vary by several degrees over short distances, and humidity levels can shift dramatically. The water cycle itself transforms at the hands of these forests. Redwood forests play a vital role in the water cycle, capturing and storing water from fog and rain. The forests act as a natural reservoir for water, storing it in their roots and soil, releasing it slowly through the dry season. The forests help prevent flooding by absorbing and slowing down rainwater, rather than allowing precipitation to rush downhill in destructive torrents. The forest canopy, leaf litter, and soil absorb water gradually, allowing it to percolate slowly into the ground. This natural regulation protects downstream communities from flash floods while ensuring steady flow during dry periods. The forests help maintain water quality by filtering rainwater and runoff, removing impurities as water passes through layers of soil and vegetation. This natural filtration system ensures that the water emerging from the forest in streams and rivers is clean and pure. The forests are a source of clean, fresh water for streams and rivers, sustaining aquatic ecosystems that depend on consistent, high-quality water flow. As evening falls and fog begins to creep through the canopy, the forest becomes a temple of water and air, a place where climate is not imposed from above, but created by the forest itself, through a continuous dialogue between trees and atmosphere. Segment 3. The Canopy World, Life in the Sky. High above the forest floor, hundreds of feet into the air, an entire ecosystem exists that few humans have ever witnessed. Entire ecosystems live in the canopy of redwoods, hundreds of feet above the ground. This is not a metaphorical statement, but a literal description of a distinct community of organisms that complete their entire life cycles suspended in the air among branches and needles. Canopy soil mats form from decomposed leaves and dust, creating unexpected pockets of fertility in the branches themselves. These mats accumulate over decades and centuries, rich with organic matter that has fallen from the canopy or blown in on the wind. They support ferns, moss, and even small trees. Yes, within these soil mats, rooted high in the canopy, tiny trees grow, creating miniature forests within the forest. The original tree becomes a substrate for new growth, a mother tree nurturing a generation of children through aerial channels of nutrient and water exchange. Hundreds of plant species grow in the canopy of redwoods, including ferns, moss, lichen, and huckleberries. These plants hang from branches, drape across limbs, and create a verdant layer of green that is perhaps more diverse than the forest floor itself. Some of these plants are specialists, found nowhere else on Earth, having evolved specifically to live in this aerial realm. The lichen paints the branches in shades of grey and green, slowly breaking down the bark and creating even more surface area for other plants to colonize. The ecological role of these canopy plants is profound. Canopy plants provide food for insects, amphibians, and other animals. The huckleberries that grow high in the canopy are harvested by birds and mammals that venture into this upper world. Insects feed on the leaves and flowers of canopy plants, and these insects in turn become food for birds and other predators. An entire food web is woven through the canopy, self-contained and largely invisible to observers on the ground. One of the most remarkable inhabitants of the redwood canopy is the wandering salamander. These small, delicate amphibians live their entire lives in the canopy of a single redwood tree. They never descend to the ground, never experience the forest floor, never see the landscape beyond their single tree. They are born in the moist soil mats, raise their young among the leaves and moss, and complete their entire existence within the branches of one ancient giant. Their eggs do not pass through a tadpole stage, but develop entirely on land, surrounded by moisture, but never requiring open water. It is an existence almost unimaginable to creatures like ourselves, yet it represents a perfect adaptation to a specific ecological niche. Tree voles, bats, and birds also inhabit the canopy. The northern flying squirrel glides through the canopy at night, its membranes spread wide as it leaps from branch to branch in a graceful descent. Bats navigate the darkness with sonar, hunting insects among the highest reaches of the trees. Various bird species make their homes here, finding security in the dense foliage and abundant food sources. Some birds, like spotted owls and marbled murrelets, nest in the shady, moist canopy. These species have evolved to require the specific conditions found only in old-growth redwood forests. The spotted owl, with its dark plumage and large dark eyes, hunts under the canopy cover, preferring the darkness of ancient forest to the open spaces of younger growth. The redwoods themselves participate actively in the chemical composition of the air around them. Redwoods release terpenes from their leaves, which help condense moisture into clouds that cool the forest. Terpenes are volatile organic compounds that interact with atmospheric particles, promoting the formation of water droplets. In this way, the trees create the very fog that sustains them, a remarkable feedback loop where the trees modify their environment to ensure their own survival and the survival of their dependent ecosystem. The canopy is a haven for rare and specialized species, many found nowhere else on Earth. Canopy ecosystems are isolated and can be mini-worlds of their own. A single old-growth redwood tree, with its canopy soil mats and aerial ecosystem, contains more biodiversity than many terrestrial forests of considerably larger land area. These are islands of life suspended in the air, separated from other canopy ecosystems by gaps of open space, creating isolation that drives evolutionary specialization and adaptation. Imagine standing in this canopy world, surrounded by branches thick as tree trunks, covered in moss and lichen, supporting gardens of ferns and flowering plants. The light here is dim and green, filtered through multiple layers of needles. The air is moist and cool, constant and unchanging. Small creatures move through this world with purpose and grace, living lives of remarkable complexity in a realm few humans will ever see. Segment 4. The Forest Floor. World of Decay and Renewal. Descending from the canopy, let us now explore the forest floor, that realm of quiet darkness where the most fundamental processes of life and death take place. The understory of redwood forests is rich with ferns, shrubs, and rhododendrons. Unlike the tall, sun-seeking canopy far above, these plants have adapted to life in partial shade and cool, moist conditions. Ferns unfurl their delicate fronds, photosynthesizing in the dim light that filters through the dense canopy. Rhododendrons display their brilliant flowers in spring, creating pockets of color against the predominantly green backdrop of the forest. The understory creates a middle layer of vegetation, a transition zone between the giants above and the intimate realm of the forest floor below. Upon the actual forest floor lies one of the most important features of any forest ecosystem: fallen logs and decaying wood. These provide habitat and nutrients for countless organisms. A single fallen redwood log might span a distance of 300 feet or more, stretching across the forest floor like a massive timeline of decay. This log is not dead in any ecological sense, but rather transformed into a new form of life, serving purposes distinct from its role as a living tree. The wood remains largely intact for decades, its tannin-rich composition resisting rot and providing a stable substrate for colonization by other organisms. Decomposers like fungi and bacteria recycle nutrients from dead plant material. Fungi send their thread-like hyphae into the wood, breaking down complex polymers into simpler compounds that can be absorbed and used for growth. The fungal fruiting bodies, mushrooms and toadstools of remarkable diversity emerge from the logs to release spores into the air. Bacteria work in parallel, breaking down organic matter into its constituent elements. This decomposition is not a rapid process, but occurs over decades and centuries, releasing nutrients slowly into the soil and making them available for uptake by living plants. The forest floor itself presents a particular type of environment. The forest floor is dark and moist, creating ideal conditions for mosses and ferns. The canopy above is so dense that only scattered beams of sunlight penetrate to the floor, creating an environment of perpetual twilight. Yet this darkness does not indicate death, but rather a different kind of life, one adapted to low-light conditions. Mosses carpet the ground in shades of green and gold, their delicate structures designed to absorb water directly from the air and soil without requiring roots for support. Ferns of various species spread their fronds across the forest floor, photosynthesizing in the limited light and releasing spores that drift through the humid air. The ecological role of the forest floor extends far beyond simple decomposition. Redwood roots help stabilize the forest floor and prevent erosion. The shallow, spreading root system of redwoods acts like a net, holding soil particles in place and preventing the downhill movement of earth that would otherwise occur on slopes. This stabilizing effect is particularly important in areas of heavy rainfall where erosion would otherwise be severe. The forest floor is a mosaic of microhabitats, each supporting different species. A single square meter of forest floor might contain dozens of distinct microhabitats, each with its own assemblage of organisms. A rotting log represents one habitat. The space between the log and the soil represents another. The underside of a leaf, moist and rich in organic compounds, represents yet another. This diversity at the microscale creates an extraordinary variety of species living in close proximity. One of the most poetic features of the forest floor is the concept of nurse logs. Fallen logs become nurse logs, nurturing new growth and providing shelter. When a young redwood seedling takes root atop a decomposing log, it gains several advantages. The log provides elevation above the forest floor, keeping the seedling away from the densest populations of insects and pathogens. The decomposing wood provides a constant source of nutrients, having been mined from the canopy and locked away in the wood for centuries. The log retains moisture even during dry seasons, providing a steady source of water. In this way, nurse logs become midwives for the next generation of redwoods, nurturing new life from the bodies of ancient trees. Many of the largest and most impressive redwoods today began their lives perched atop such logs, using their parents' body as a stepping stone toward their own long future. The understory hosts a remarkable diversity of animal life. The understory is home to salamanders, insects, and small mammals. These creatures navigate a three-dimensional world of leaves, branches, and soil pores, finding shelter and food in a landscape rich with complexity. Salamanders slip through damp spaces between leaves and soil, hunting tiny invertebrates. Insects of astounding diversity breed in the moist leaf litter, creating populations that cascade through the food web, supporting birds, reptiles, and mammals. Small mammals like mice, shrews, and voles make their homes among the roots and leaf litter, their activities aerating the soil and dispersing seeds throughout the forest. As night falls and darkness deepens, the forest floor becomes even more alive. Fungi fruiting bodies emerge from the soil, their ghostly forms visible only to those who know where to look. Insects emerge from their daytime hiding places, beginning their nocturnal searches for food and mates. The forest floor becomes a stage upon which countless dramas of predator and prey, birth and death, growth and decay play out in silence. The understory is rich in biodiversity, with each species playing a unique role in maintaining the health and function of the entire forest ecosystem. Imagine lying on the forest floor, surrounded by moss so soft it seems to embrace you, covered in a blanket of leaves, feeling the slow pulse of life in the earth beneath you. This is a place of safety, of rest, of profound connection to the cycles of existence itself. Segment 5. Wildlife of the Redwood Realm. Beneath the canopy and within the protected embrace of the ancient redwoods lives a remarkable diversity of wildlife, each species having evolved to thrive in this unique environment. Redwood forests are home to many species, including coho salmon, giant garter snakes, and Pacific-tailed frogs. The salmon return from the ocean each year, swimming upstream through cold, clear streams fed by redwood forest springs, to spawn in the gravel beds of their birth. These fish bring nutrients from the ocean, fertilizing the forest with their bodies when they die after spawning. The giant garter snakes, among the largest garter snakes in North America, hunt frogs and fish in the streams and wetlands of the forest, their scaled bodies adapted to life in moist environments. The Pacific-tailed frogs, small and cryptic, breed in the forest streams and spend much of their lives in the moist leaf litter and soil. Many of these species face an uncertain future. Endangered species like the marbled murrelet and spotted owl depend on redwood forests for their survival. The marbled murrelet is a seabird that spends its non-breeding season on the ocean but returns to ancient redwood forests to nest on broad branches high in the canopy. This unusual lifestyle requires the specific conditions found only in old-growth forests. The spotted owl, a medium-sized raptor with dark plumage and large dark eyes, adapted to seeing in dim light, hunts small mammals under the dense forest canopy. Both species have become symbols of old-growth forest conservation, their survival serving as an indicator of forest health and integrity. Larger mammals also traverse these forests. Mountain lions travel through redwood forests, often covering hundreds of miles in their search for food and mates. These solitary predators, largest of the wild cats in North America, adapt to the challenging terrain of steep slopes and dense vegetation with remarkable grace. A single mountain lion territory might encompass the entire range of several redwood forests, and the animal might not encounter another mountain lion for months at a time. Their presence in the forest indicates an intact ecosystem with sufficient prey populations to support these top predators. The redwood forest is a critical intersection point in the global map of animal migration. Redwood forests provide crucial habitat for migratory birds. In spring and fall, millions of birds pass through or linger in the forests, using them as stopover points during their long journeys between breeding grounds in the north and wintering grounds in the south. The abundant insects and fruit provide essential fuel for these travelers, and the shelter of the dense forest provides protection from predators and weather. The forest supports a wide variety of organisms at every ecological level. The forests support a wide variety of insects, amphibians, and reptiles. The insects range from tiny mites and springtails to large beetle species, each with its own role in the ecosystem. Amphibians depend on the moisture and specific habitat conditions of the redwood forest, using the streams and moist soil for breeding and development. Reptiles, including various snake and lizard species, have adapted to the cool, moist environment, some becoming active only during the warmest months, while others remain active throughout the year. Many species are specially adapted to the conditions found in redwood forests. Many species are adapted to the cool, moist environment of the redwood forest. This adaptation occurs at every level, from the microscopic structure of enzyme systems to the large-scale morphology of body shape and size. Species found only in redwood forests have often lived there so long that they have become unable to survive anywhere else. They are locked into this environment by millions of years of evolution, their survival completely dependent on the continued existence of their redwood forest home. In an era of rapid environmental change, the redwood forest takes on a new significance. The forests are a refuge for species threatened by habitat loss and climate change. As habitats disappear around the world due to human development, and as global temperatures shift due to climate change, the redwood forest serves as a refuge for species unable to adapt to the new conditions. The cool summers and mild winters of the Pacific coast, the abundant moisture, the stable conditions that have prevailed for millennia, all combine to make the redwood forest an island of stability in a rapidly changing world. Redwood forests are a haven for rare and endemic species. Endemic species are those found nowhere else on Earth, and the redwood forest hosts dozens of such species. These species are living testaments to the long evolutionary history of the redwood forest and to its unique environmental conditions. The loss of redwood forests would mean the extinction of these species, the permanent erasure from the earth of millions of years of evolutionary innovation. The forests provide food, shelter, and breeding grounds for countless animals. Every conceivable ecological role is filled by some species. Predators that hunt other animals, herbivores that feed on plants, detritivores that consume dead matter, and parasites that live on other organisms' bodies. The diversity of forms is staggering, and the complexity of the interactions between species creates a web of relationships that has taken millions of years to develop and would take millions of years to replace if destroyed. As darkness falls and the diurnal animals settle into sleep, the nocturnal creatures emerge. The forest becomes alive with a different cast of characters, each pursuing their own survival, their own reproduction, their own place in the grand tapestry of life. Segment 6: The Legacy of Time and Resilience. The redwood forest is not merely a collection of trees, but a living archive, a record of Earth's deep past written in wood and growth. Redwood forests have been home to Native American tribes for thousands of years. Long before European explorers set foot on the Pacific coast, Native American peoples lived in harmony with the redwoods, using the trees for shelter, tools, food, and fiber. The cultural connection between these peoples and the forests is ancient and profound, woven into their history, mythology, and spiritual beliefs. The forests themselves are cultural entities, deserving of respect and protection. Throughout history, the redwood forest has inspired awe and wonder in those who have encountered it. The forests have inspired awe and wonder for generations. Standing before a 2,000-year-old tree, contemplating its immense size and age creates an emotional response that transcends rational thought. Humans are moved to tears, to silence, to philosophical contemplation by the mere presence of these ancient giants. The redwoods inspire a recognition of something larger than ourselves, something that has endured far longer than any human achievement and will likely endure far longer still. In modern times, redwoods have been featured in movies and literature, symbolizing resilience and longevity. The image of the tallest tree on Earth has captured the imagination of storytellers, who use it metaphorically to represent human aspirations and the passage of time. In films, redwoods create atmospheres of mystery and ancient wisdom. In literature, they serve as symbols of nature's grandeur and humanity's smallness in the face of geological time. The forests have become a popular destination for nature lovers and hikers. Thousands of visitors walk through redwood forests each year, seeking connection with nature and respite from the stresses of modern life. These visits create economic incentives for protection and also spread awareness of the forest's importance. Each visitor becomes an ambassador, returning to their own communities with stories of the redwoods and newfound commitment to their protection. The protection of these forests has become a matter of legal and institutional priority. Redwood forests are protected by federal, state, and local parks. Through the designation of protected areas, the establishment of regulations governing timber harvest, and the enforcement of these rules, governments and conservation organizations have taken steps to ensure the survival of these forests. Yet the protection is often fragile, dependent on continued political will and public support. The forests serve as inspiration for human creativity. The forests are a source of inspiration for artists, writers, and scientists. Painters attempt to capture the play of light and shadow in the canopy. Poets write verses attempting to express the feeling of standing among these ancient trees. Scientists study the forests to understand ecology, adaptation, resilience, and the mechanisms of long-term survival. Photographers create images that convey the scale and majesty of the forest in ways that words cannot. In our contemporary moment, redwood forests have taken on symbolic significance beyond their ecological and cultural importance. Redwood forests are a symbol of conservation and environmental protection. The effort to preserve redwood forests has become synonymous with the broader environmental movement. To fight for the redwoods is to fight for the preservation of wild places and natural systems in an increasingly developed world. To protect the redwoods is to assert that some things are more valuable than economic gain, that some places deserve to be preserved in their natural state for their own sake and for the sake of future generations. The forests represent something precious and irreplaceable. The forests are a living legacy of Earth's ancient past. In the redwood forest, you can encounter living organisms that sprouted when the Roman Empire was young. You can stand in the presence of wood that was laid down in growth rings during the Middle Ages, that accumulated during the Age of Exploration, that continues to grow even now. The forests are a temporal bridge, connecting us physically and directly to the deep past of human civilization and the incomprehensibly deep past of Earth's own history. In a time of rapid change and uncertainty, the forests offer something remarkable. The forests are a testament to the power of nature to heal and renew. Trees that have been burned by catastrophic fires sprout new growth from their stumps and surviving bark. Forests that have been logged regenerate, though the new growth never quite replaces the majesty of the ancient forest. Species driven to the brink of extinction find refuge in protected forests and begin slow recoveries. The redwood forest is a place where the future seems possible, where change and growth occur at timescales that allow us to witness them, where human intervention can make a tangible difference. Imagine standing beneath a redwood that sprouted when your ancestors were living in the Middle Ages, a tree that has grown continuously through every century of your family's history. Imagine what that tree might have witnessed, what dramas and changes it has silently observed. This is the legacy of the redwood forest. Segment 7. Unique features and adaptations. The redwood forest contains phenomena so unusual and remarkable that they seem almost mythological. One of the most striking of these is the formation of circular clusters of trees. Redwoods can grow in circles, known as fairy rings or family circles, from sprouts at the base of a parent tree. This occurs when a mature redwood falls or dies, and the burls along its base sprout multiple new trees simultaneously. These new trees grow in a ring pattern, creating a circular arrangement that is clearly visible from above or from a distance. As the new trees grow, they surround the location where the parent tree once stood, their roots eventually fusing together. The ecological significance of this phenomenon extends far beyond mere aesthetics. The trees in a fairy ring support and nourish each other through their roots. The ring formation is not a random occurrence, but rather a direct result of the interconnected root system. Roots of neighboring trees in the fairy ring often graft together, creating physical connections that allow for the transfer of water and nutrients. A tree struggling during a drought might receive additional water from a more fortunate neighbor. A tree infected with disease might be protected by antimicrobial compounds from its neighbors. In this way, the fairy ring becomes a superorganism, a collection of individual trees functioning as a coordinated whole. The remarkable resilience of redwoods in the face of fire demonstrates the power of evolution to solve the problem of survival. Redwoods can survive fires with their thick bark protecting the living tissue inside. The bark, which can exceed a foot in thickness, is composed of dead cells with very little flammable material, creating a shield that insulates the living tissue beneath from the intense heat of a fire. The tannins within the bark further protect against fire, their chemical properties making the bark extremely difficult to ignite and slow to burn. Trees that survive fires bear the marks of their ordeal. The blackened hollows in redwoods are evidence of past fires and the tree's resilience. A large redwood might contain a hollow chamber within its trunk, burned out by a centuries-old fire. Yet the tree continues to live, to grow, to photosynthesize and produce seeds. Some of the oldest redwoods have hollow cores, the central heartwood consumed by fire, yet the outer layers of living sapwood continue to function, sustaining the entire tree. The redwood's adaptation to capturing water extends to every part of the tree. Redwoods can absorb water from fog at all levels of the canopy. This is not a passive process relying solely on root uptake, but an active mechanism found in the leaves themselves. The needles of the redwood have specialized structures that allow them to absorb water and trace minerals directly from fog and mist. Water droplets that condense on the needle surface can be absorbed directly into the leaf tissue, bypassing the normal pathway through the root system. In this way, the canopy becomes a secondary root system, feeding the tree directly from the atmosphere. The scale of the redwood forest is almost incomprehensible. The forests are home to some of the oldest and largest trees on Earth. No other tree species can match the redwood's combination of height, age, and volume. The largest redwoods by volume contain more than 10,000 cubic meters of wood. The oldest exceed 2,000 years. The tallest reach toward 400 feet into the sky. These superlatives are not mere statistics, but measures of the extraordinary achievement represented by a single organism sustained for millennia. Within the larger ecosystem, redwoods play a role of paramount importance. Redwoods are a keystone species supporting countless other organisms. A keystone species is one whose ecological role is disproportionate to its abundance. Remove the keystone species and the entire structure collapses. In the case of redwoods, their removal would eliminate the canopy ecosystem, transform the microclimate, alter the water cycle, and cause the extinction of dozens or hundreds of species dependent on the specific conditions the redwoods provide. The redwoods are not merely one species among many, but rather the architectural foundation upon which the entire ecosystem rests. The redwood forest continues to provide refuge to life in an era of rapid environmental change. The forests are a haven for rare and endangered species. As habitats disappear elsewhere on Earth, species retreat to the places of last refuge. The redwood forest, with its stable climate, abundant resources, and extensive protection, serves as an ark, preserving genetic diversity and ecosystem function, even as the rest of the world experiences rapid transformation. More than anything, redwoods represent an idea about how to live long and well. Redwoods are a symbol of longevity and resilience. The fact that a single organism can live for more than 2,000 years, surviving fires, droughts, storms, and the countless challenges presented by a long existence, suggests something profound about what survival requires. Patience, flexibility, deep roots, interconnection with others, the capacity to recover from injury, the ability to thrive in limitation. The redwoods embody these principles, and in contemplating them, humans might find wisdom applicable to their own lives. The forests are a source of inspiration and wonder for people of all ages. Children visit and feel their sense of smallness and insignificance momentarily give way to wonder and awe. Adults find respite and perspective. Elders recognize in the ancient trees a mirror of their own long lives. Scientists find endless subjects for study and discovery. Artists find inspiration for creative work. Spiritual seekers find sanctuary. Picture yourself walking among these circles of trees, each ring a family, each tree connected to all the others, their roots forming networks, their trunks bearing scars of ancient fires, their needles catching fog from the ocean air. This is a world where time moves differently, where age is not decay but accumulation, where individual trees are parts of larger wholes. Segment 8. The internal world of growth and survival. Within the trunk of every redwood lies a record of time itself, written in the language of wood. Each year, a redwood adds a new ring of wood to its trunk, a layer of living growth. These rings are not merely decorative, but represent a complete record of the tree's annual experience. In years of abundant water and mild weather, the rings are wide, recording rapid growth and favorable conditions. In years of drought, fire, or other stress, the rings are narrow, documenting hardship and slow growth. By reading these rings, scientists can reconstruct the climate and environmental conditions of the past, decoding messages from centuries gone by. The growth of a redwood is a slow and deliberate process. A young redwood in its first few decades grows relatively quickly, perhaps a foot or more per year in height. But as it ages and reaches greater heights, growth slows. The tallest redwoods, Those exceeding 350 feet grow slowly indeed, adding a few feet per decade in the final centuries of their lives. This slow growth is not a failure of the tree, but rather an adaptation to extreme height. The taller a tree becomes, the greater the stress on its wood, the more water must be transported to the top. A tree hundreds of feet tall must slow its growth to ensure structural integrity and to maintain the physiological processes necessary for survival. The wood itself is a marvel of engineering. Redwood wood possesses properties that make it unique among trees. It is simultaneously very strong and relatively light. It contains compounds that make it resistant to rot, resisting the onslaught of decomposer organisms that attack other wood. The wood is also resistant to insects, the tannins and other compounds deterring the various beetles and borers that bore into the wood of other species. This combination of properties means that redwood wood, once dead and exposed to the environment, can persist for centuries, slowly decomposing while remaining structurally sound for decades or even longer. Within the living redwood, the vascular system functions to transport water and nutrients. Water is absorbed by the roots from the soil and drawn upward through the xylem, a tissue composed of tiny tubes that stretch from the roots to the leaves. This water transport occurs partly through passive forces like capillarity and root pressure, but also through active processes driven by water loss in the leaves. As water evaporates from the needles, it pulls more water upward through the xylem, creating a continuous column of water stretching from the roots to the top of the tree. In the tallest redwoods, this water column must reach heights exceeding 380 feet, a remarkable achievement of physics and biology working in concert. The transport of sugars and other organic compounds occurs through the phloem, another tissue system that distributes the products of photosynthesis from the leaves to the rest of the tree. Sugars manufactured in the leaves are transported downward through the phloem to fuel the growth of wood, the expansion of the root system, and the storage of energy in the trunk. This two-way traffic of water and dissolved compounds is continuous throughout the growing season, creating dynamic flows within the tree. The cambium, a thin layer of cells located just beneath the bark, is responsible for the production of new wood. Each year, the cambium divides repeatedly, producing new cells that become wood on the inside and bark on the outside. The pace of this division is regulated by seasonal patterns, with rapid growth during spring and early summer slowing as the season progresses. The result is the visible growth rings of the tree, each ring representing a year of growth, a complete record of the tree's life. Photosynthesis, the process by which trees convert light energy into chemical energy, occurs in the needles. The tiny needles of the redwood, arranged along the branches, capture sunlight and use that light energy to drive chemical reactions that split water molecules and combine carbon dioxide into sugar. The efficiency of this process varies with light availability, temperature, and water availability. In the shaded understory, where young redwoods grow, photosynthetic rates are lower than they would be in full sunlight. But the young trees are adapted to this condition and thrive nonetheless. The tree's reproductive strategy serves to ensure genetic propagation even in the face of long lifespans. As a redwood matures, typically after several decades of growth, it begins to produce seeds. The small cones of the redwood contain many seeds, each tiny and light, adapted for wind dispersal. Millions of seeds are produced over a redwood's lifetime, but only a tiny fraction will find conditions suitable for germination and growth. The rest become food for birds and other animals, contributing to ecosystem productivity rather than to tree reproduction. The handful of seeds that do successfully germinate and grow will face decades of competition with other plants and exposure to predation and disease before achieving the security of substantial size. The redwood's asexual reproduction through burls provides another strategy. The burls, those mysterious knobby growths on the trunk, contain dormant buds capable of sprouting into new trees. This mechanism of reproduction ensures that even if a tree becomes too damaged or diseased to produce viable seeds, it can still contribute genetically to the next generation. A tree with 1,000 dormant buds in its burls might regenerate 1,000 times, even in the unlikely event that all seeds fail to produce viable offspring. The redwood's root system, while shallow, is extraordinarily extensive. Root grafting, the physical fusion of roots from different trees, is common in redwood forests. When roots grow close to one another, they may touch and then fuse, creating a physical connection. This connection allows for the transfer of water, nutrients, and even chemical signals between trees. A tree with access to abundant water might share that water with a neighbor in drought. A tree that detects a pest or disease organism might send chemical alarm signals through the root network, allowing neighboring trees to begin chemical defenses before being attacked. The interconnection created through root grafting transforms the forest from a collection of individuals into a unified system. What appears to be individual trees is actually a larger organism, a network, a superorganism. Photosynthetic products may be shared between trees, moving from a tree in full sunlight to a shaded neighbor. Sugars might move downward and laterally through the root system, supporting growth in different parts of the forest network. This concept of forest networks has emerged more clearly in recent years through scientific study. The mycorrhizal network, a fungal network that connects tree roots, extends this concept further. Fungi form associations with tree roots, penetrating into the root cells and extending through the soil. The fungal network can connect roots of different trees, species, and ages, creating a literal underground internet through which chemical and electrical signals travel. Water and nutrients are exchanged. Alarm signals cascade through the network when one tree detects danger. Mothers provide extra resources to their offspring. The forest truly becomes a single entity, coordinated through fungal networks, connected through root grafts, and unified through a shared vascular system. Imagine the interior of a redwood, the constant movement of water and dissolved compounds, the slow expansion as new wood forms, the steady work of metabolism and growth continuing year after year for millennia. Segment 9. Forest Dynamics and Disturbance. The redwood forest is not static but dynamic, constantly changing in response to natural disturbances and internal processes. Redwood forests are dynamic, with trees constantly growing, dying, and being replaced. At any given moment, trees in various stages of life occupy the forest. Young saplings just beginning their journey skyward, mature trees at peak productivity, ancient trees growing slowly, dying trees losing their vital functions, dead trees in various stages of decay, still providing habitat and nutrients. This diversity of ages creates a structural complexity absent from younger forests. The forests are a mosaic of different ages and stages of growth. A redwood forest might contain trees ranging from newly germinated seedlings to ancient giants over 2,000 years old. This age structure is not randomly distributed, but reflects the history of disturbances and recruitment events. Areas where major fires occurred centuries ago will contain relatively young trees, all having regenerated after the same disturbance event. Areas that have not experienced major disturbance for many centuries will contain a mixture of trees of various ages. The distribution of ages tells the story of the forest's history. The forests are shaped by natural disturbances like fire, wind, and flooding. Fire is perhaps the most significant of these disturbances. While the redwood's thick bark and tannin-rich wood provide significant protection from fire, fires still kill some trees, especially smaller ones, and damage many others. A major fire burns through the understory, removing smaller trees and shrubs. This creates openings in the canopy, allowing light to reach the forest floor and stimulating the growth of plants adapted to brighter conditions. The ash from the fire enriches the soil with minerals, and the disturbance of the soil surface can stimulate seed germination. In the years following a fire, the forest enters a phase of rapid change, with certain species increasing in abundance, while fire-sensitive species decline. Wind can topple trees, particularly those already weakened by age or disease, or those with shallow root systems on unstable slopes. When a large tree falls, it creates a gap in the canopy, an opening that allows light to reach the forest floor in a way it hasn't for perhaps centuries. This gap is quickly colonized by shade-tolerant shrubs and young trees that have been waiting in the understory for such an opportunity. The fallen tree itself becomes a nurse log or a home for countless organisms. Flooding occurs in redwood forests that occupy floodplain areas. Heavy rains or rapid snowmelt causes streams and rivers to overflow their banks, spreading water and sediment across the floodplain. This deposition of sediment can bury portions of the forest floor under new soil, creating a blank slate for plant colonization. It can also erode soil, exposing roots and sometimes toppling trees. The flooding deposits nutrients and water, which stimulates growth following the disturbance event. The forests are a haven for succession, with new growth replacing old trees. Succession is the process of ecological change over time, where one community of organisms is gradually replaced by another. In a forest, succession typically proceeds from pioneer species that colonize disturbed areas toward a climax community of shade-tolerant species. In redwood forests, the progression is more complex because individual redwoods are so long-lived. A redwood forest is not a transient stage on the way to some other community, but a stable endpoint, a climax community that persists for millennia. The forests are a source of resilience, with trees able to recover from disturbances. This resilience operates at multiple scales. Individual trees recover from injuries through the production of callus tissue that seals wounds. Branches grow back after damage. Trees survive fires that char their bark, but leave the living tissue beneath unharmed. The forest as a whole recovers from disturbances through the growth of young trees and the recovery of damaged adults. The system as a whole appears to be resilient to most disturbances that have historically occurred. The capacity of the forest to recover from disturbance is not infinite, however. Extreme disturbances can cause permanent changes. Old-growth forests that are clear-cut, with all trees removed and the soil disturbed, are unlikely to recover to old-growth status within any reasonable human timescale. Some old-growth forest characteristics, including the presence of large snags, the development of complex canopy structure, and the re-establishment of old-growth dependent species, typically require centuries to develop. The recovery of truly old-growth forest conditions requires thousands of years. The forests are a haven for biodiversity, with each species playing a unique role. The diversity of forest ages and structures creates niches for an incredible variety of species. Pioneer species colonize recent disturbances. Shade-tolerant species thrive in the deep shade beneath old-growth trees. Decay specialists live in dead wood. Soil specialists live in mineral soil. Aquatic species live in streams and seepage areas. The totality of these species creates a complex web of interactions that maintains the forest's function and productivity. The forests are a source of stability, with trees able to withstand extreme conditions. The long evolutionary history of redwood trees has resulted in adaptations to the conditions of their environment. These adaptations allow redwoods to survive or tolerate conditions that would kill most other trees. Drought tolerance, fire resistance, disease resistance, and wind stability all reflect millions of years of natural selection. The deep past of the redwood forests, extending back to the age of dinosaurs, demonstrates a remarkable stability. Redwoods survived the climate changes of the Ice Age, retreating before advancing glaciers and re-expanding when climate warmed. Species went extinct around them, but the redwoods persisted. Disturbances both damage and create. The destruction wrought by a major fire or flood simultaneously creates opportunities for new growth and change. The dead wood of fallen trees feeds decomposers. The ash and nutrient-rich sediment deposited by fires and floods fertilize new growth. The gaps in the canopy created by fallen trees allow light to reach the forest floor. The forest seems to embrace disturbance as a necessary part of its function, a driver of diversity and renewal. Imagine the forest recovering from a great fire, sprouts emerging from the burned base of a fallen tree, seedlings germinating in the ash-enriched soil, the forest slowly returning to verdure and growth. This process takes decades and centuries, but the forest is patient, working at timescales beyond human comprehension. Segment 10. The sensory world of the forest. The redwood forest engages all the senses, creating an immersive experience that differs radically from the sensory deprivation of urban environments. The gentle rustle of redwood leaves in the wind is a soothing sound for sleep. The needles of the redwood, while small, collectively create a soft susurration when wind passes through them. This sound is not the harsh rustling of deciduous trees, but rather a soft, almost whispering quality. The wind moves through the canopy with difficulty, its force dissipated by the dense foliage, producing only a gentle murmur that reaches the forest floor. The randomness of this sound, the way it waxes and wanes with fluctuating breezes, creates a natural white noise effect that masks sudden sounds and promotes relaxation. The drip of water from fog-covered leaves is a calming sound for relaxation. During the foggy season, as water condenses on the needles and collects into larger droplets, a gentle dripping begins. The drops fall from the canopy to the understory, then from the understory to the forest floor, creating an intermittent pattering sound. The intervals between drops are irregular, following no predictable pattern, yet the overall effect is profoundly calming. The sound suggests moisture, abundance, the vital flow of water through the ecosystem. It is a sound that calms the nervous system, suggesting safety and nourishment. Birdsong fills the forest with melodic content. The chirp of birds and the buzz of insects create a peaceful ambience. At dawn and dusk, birds become particularly vocal, their calls and songs filling the air. Different species produce different vocalizations. The bold calls of jays, the complex songs of thrushes, the elaborate calls of woodpeckers. Insects add their own sounds, the buzz of cicadas in hot afternoons, the chirping of crickets on cool evenings. These animal vocalizations add a layer of richness and life to the forest soundscape. The forest's natural rhythms and cycles promote a sense of harmony and balance. The day-night cycle is the most obvious rhythm, with the forest's activity patterns shifting dramatically between day and night. But longer cycles operate as well. The seasons, the tidal cycles affecting the moisture-laden ocean winds, the many-year cycles of fire return intervals. These cycles operate at scales from hours to centuries, creating nested rhythms that structure time in the forest. The forest's ambient sounds are ideal for meditation and mindfulness. The randomness of natural sounds, lacking the predictable regularity of human-made sounds, encourages a state of relaxed alertness. This is the state most conducive to meditation, where the mind is calm but not asleep, attentive but not focused on any particular thought. The forest's soundscape naturally guides the brain into this state. The forest's quiet life is a haven for unwinding and letting go of stress. Beneath the layer of animal sounds and rustling leaves lies a fundamental quietness to the forest. The dense vegetation absorbs sound, preventing echoes and reverberations. Human-made noises do not intrude. The absence of the constant noise that characterizes human environments creates an opportunity for the nervous system to relax, to lower its baseline state of alertness, to release stress accumulated during time in louder environments. Beyond sound, the forest offers richness to other senses. The cool, moist air of the forest is calming and refreshing. The temperature of the forest, regulated by the dense canopy and the constant evaporation of water, remains moderate throughout the year. In summer, the forest is cool compared to open areas exposed to direct sunlight. In winter, the forest is relatively warm compared to open areas. This temperature stability, combined with the humidity created by constant water movement, creates an air quality that most humans find profoundly comfortable. The smell of the forest is distinctive and calming. The forest's earthy scent is calming and refreshing. The primary component of this earthy scent is geosmin, a compound produced by soil bacteria. This compound, which humans are extremely sensitive to, triggers a neurological response of relaxation and well-being. The scent of earth and soil carries evolutionary significance, as it signals fertile ground and the presence of water, things associated with survival and comfort. The smell of damp soil and decaying leaves is soothing for sleep. The forest floor, constantly decomposing, releases volatile organic compounds that have a distinctive smell. These compounds include various terpenes and other volatile molecules. The scent is not unpleasant, but rather earthy and organic, suggesting the cycle of growth and decay, life and death, renewal and change. The forest's natural aromas promote a sense of relaxation and well-being. Beyond geosmin, the forest air contains volatile compounds released by the living trees themselves. Terpenes, which have antimicrobial properties and serve defensive functions for the trees, also create the fresh, piney scent associated with forests. These compounds enter the human body through inhalation and can have measurable effects on the immune system and overall sense of well-being. The feel of the forest environment is crucial to its sensory impact. The feel of the forest floor is soft and comforting. The accumulation of many generations of leaf litter creates a surface that is soft and yielding to the foot. Walking on this surface requires less muscular effort than walking on pavement or harder ground. The softness engages a sense of comfort and ease. The forest's natural textures promote a sense of relaxation and well-being. The smoothness of redwood bark, the fuzziness of moss, the sponginess of decomposing wood, the delicate fronds of ferns, the softness of leaves. All these textures offer a richness of tactile experience, absent from human-made environments of concrete, plastic, and metal. The gentle touch of cool, moist air on the skin is soothing. The forest's cool, moist air is refreshing and invigorating. The sensation of this air on exposed skin creates a subtle but distinct sense of comfort and well-being. The light in the forest creates a particularly calming visual environment. The forest's dappled light is calming and soothing. The canopy filters sunlight, breaking it into patches of light and shadow. This constant play of light and shadow, with no area of the forest in complete darkness or complete brightness, creates a visual environment that is neither stimulating nor depressing, but rather calm and balanced. The gentle play of light and shadow is ideal for sleep. The dappled light suggests late afternoon, the time when the body begins to prepare for sleep. The alternation of light and shadow is gentle on the eyes, neither too bright nor too dim. The forest's natural light promotes a sense of relaxation and well-being. Natural light, with its full spectrum of wavelengths, is processed differently by the brain than artificial light. The presence of natural light supports normal circadian rhythms and mood regulation. The forest's natural ambience is ideal for unwinding and letting go of stress. All these sensory elements combine to create an environment that is almost universally perceived as calming and restorative. Whether the mechanism is biological, psychological, or spiritual, the forest has a demonstrable effect on human well-being. Imagine yourself immersed in this sensory world, the soft rustling of needles above you, the dripping of water onto the moss beneath you, the earthy scent filling your nostrils, the cool air on your skin, the gentle dappled light playing across your closed eyes. This is the forest at its most intimate. the forest as sanctuary. Segment 11. The ancient ecosystem and evolution. The redwood forest represents a living fossil, a remnant of ecosystems that dominated Earth in ages past. Redwoods have survived since the Jurassic Age of dinosaurs. The lineage of redwoods extends back at least 160 million years into Earth's past. In the time of the dinosaurs, redwood-like trees grew in many parts of the world, thriving in warmer climates that existed then. As the climate cooled and became more seasonal, these trees retreated. Redwoods survived in specific refugia where conditions remained favorable. The modern coast redwood, Sequoia sempervirens, evolved as an adaptation to the specific conditions of the Pacific coast, but its ancestors had already perfected the general body plan and many of the key adaptations visible in modern redwoods. The survival of redwoods through the ice ages demonstrates remarkable resilience. As glaciers advanced and retreated, redwoods retreated before the advancing ice and re-expanded when climate warmed. The redwood forests were never heavily glaciated, remaining in a refugium on the Pacific coast, but climate changes still caused dramatic shifts in the forest's boundaries. Species went extinct around the redwoods, but the redwoods themselves persisted, adapting to changing climate and outcompeting other tree species for dominance in their ecological niche. The forests are resistant to rot and fire, so they have survived for millions of years. This resistance to decay is partly due to the chemical composition of the wood and bark, but it is also due to the environments in which redwoods grow. The cool, moist climate limits the growth of decay-causing organisms. The frequent occurrence of fire, paradoxically, may have selected for fire-resistant trees. Any redwood tree that was more susceptible to fire was more likely to be killed before reproducing. Over millions of years, this selection pressure favored the evolution of fire-resistant traits: thick bark, tannin-rich wood, the ability to survive fires, and re-sprouted growth. The forests are a source of clean air, with redwoods pulling in carbon and storing more of it than any other tree. Through photosynthesis, redwoods remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. The carbon fixed into sugar and then into wood is locked away in the tree for the duration of the tree's life. A redwood tree living for 2,000 years represents 2,000 years of carbon sequestration. The largest redwoods, with their enormous biomass, represent the accumulation of millions of tons of carbon removed from the atmosphere. In a modern context of concern about atmospheric carbon dioxide and its role in climate change, the existence of redwood forests represents a natural solution. The permanent removal of carbon from the atmosphere and its storage in the form of long-lived biomass. The forests are a living legacy of Earth's ancient past. Every tree in a redwood forest is a survivor, a lineage with an unbroken connection to the deep past. Stand before an ancient redwood, and you stand before a being whose ancestors lived in the age of dinosaurs, whose lineage persisted through the ice ages, whose form has remained recognizable for millions of years. This is not merely a tree, but a living document of evolutionary history. The forests are home to hundreds of plant and animal species. This biodiversity is not accidental, but rather the result of millions of years of evolution within the redwood forest environment. Species evolved to fill every available ecological niche within the forest. Specialized herbivores evolved to feed on redwood needles. Decomposer organisms evolved to break down redwood wood. Predators evolved to hunt the herbivores. Parasites evolved to exploit other organisms. The result is an ecosystem of extraordinary complexity, with hundreds or thousands of interactions occurring simultaneously. The forests are a haven for rare and endangered species. Many species are found nowhere else on Earth, having evolved in isolation within the redwood forest over millions of years. The specificity of their adaptations makes them unable to survive in other environments. If redwood forests disappear, these species disappear with them. In this sense, the preservation of redwood forests is essential to the preservation of global biodiversity. The forests are a source of inspiration for artists, writers, and scientists. The redwood forest's connection to deep time, its role as a window into evolutionary processes that usually operate on timescales too long for human observation, its undeniable beauty and majesty all make it endlessly fascinating. Each generation discovers new aspects of the redwood forest, new questions to investigate, new sources of inspiration. The forests are a living legacy of Earth's ancient past. This is perhaps the most profound aspect of the redwood forest. In the presence of these ancient trees, in a forest shaped by evolutionary processes operating over tens of millions of years, humans confront their own smallness, their own brevity, their own insignificance in the sweep of geological time. This confrontation can be humbling or inspiring, but it is rarely neutral. The redwood forest forces a reckoning with time, with change, with the limits of human understanding. The forests are a testament to the power of nature to heal and renew. The redwood forest's recovery from past disturbances, its continued growth and reproduction, its expansion following favorable conditions, all testify to the resilience of natural systems. Even in the modern era, when human activities have degraded and destroyed so many ecosystems, redwood forests persist. In some places, protected redwood forests have expanded as previously logged areas regenerate. Species thought to be extinct have been rediscovered in redwood forests. The forests offer hope that natural systems can persist and even recover if given the opportunity. Consider the evolutionary timescale. Millions of years of selection, refinement, adaptation, and change, all represented in the form of a single tree. Every adaptation you see in a redwood tree, the thickness of the bark, the shade tolerance of seedlings, the efficiency of the vascular system, represents the solution to a problem posed by the environment, tested by millions of organisms, refined by millions of generations. This is not design but evolution, the slow accumulation of small changes over vast time. Segment 12. Interconnection and forest networks. Modern scientific understanding has revealed that the forest is far more interconnected than was previously appreciated. Below the soil surface lies an extensive network of fungi that connects the roots of different trees. The mycorrhizal network, as it is called, represents a biological internet, a system for communication and material exchange between trees. Fungi form associations with tree roots, receiving sugars produced by the tree through photosynthesis, in exchange for providing the tree with water and nutrients extracted from the soil. The fungal partner is not a parasite, but a mutualist, both partners benefiting from the association. These fungal networks are not simple one-to-one associations, but rather extensive webs connecting hundreds of trees of multiple species. A single fungal network might connect a young redwood seedling to an ancient mother tree, or connect a healthy tree well supplied with water to a neighbor struggling through drought. The network becomes a means for the forest to function as a unified entity, rather than as a collection of isolated individuals. Chemical signals travel through these networks. When a tree is attacked by insects, it produces volatile compounds that warn neighboring trees. These signals can travel through the fungal network, allowing trees that have not yet been attacked to begin defensive preparations. In this way, the forest functions almost as a nervous system, with signals of danger transmitted through the network and defensive responses coordinated across multiple trees. The transfer of resources through the network can be remarkable. A tree with access to abundant sunlight and water can produce excess sugars through photosynthesis. Some of these sugars can be transferred through the fungal network to shade-tolerant saplings struggling in the understory. These saplings, which would otherwise be limited by light and drought stress, can thus receive a subsidy of energy that allows them to survive. In return, if the mother tree is ever damaged or stressed, the saplings it has supported might become its most productive neighbors, potentially even providing resources back to the aging parent. This concept of resource transfer between trees, of maternal investment in offspring, of mutual aid among trees in a network, suggests that forests should be understood not as forests of individual trees, but as forests of families, networks, and cooperatives. This understanding is radical because it redefines what a forest is. A forest is not a collection of independent organisms competing for resources, but rather a cooperative enterprise, with resources shared, information exchanged, danger communicated, recovery supported. Root grafting, discussed previously, adds another layer to this interconnection. Where roots of different trees come into contact, they may fuse, creating a direct physical connection. This allows water, nutrients, and signaling molecules to flow directly between trees without passing through soil or fungal networks. A tree with its roots damaged on one side might receive water and nutrients through grafted roots from a neighbor with abundant root access. The result of these multiple interconnection mechanisms is that the forest functions as a superorganism. The individual tree is not eliminated. It continues to have its own genetic interests, its own reproduction. But the tree is also part of a larger entity, a network, a community, a forest that constrains and enables its individual actions. This duality, individual and collective simultaneously, may be the fundamental organizing principle of the forest. The implications of this understanding are profound. A forest is not fragmented when a few trees are removed, but damaged in its entirety. The loss of old trees, which serve as hubs in the fungal network and as major resource producers, damages the network's ability to function. The loss of young trees damages the potential of the network to persist into the future. The loss of diversity damages the network's ability to adapt to change. Logging that removes large old trees while leaving smaller ones intact does not preserve the forest. It severs the networks, removes the hubs, disrupts the cooperative relationships that have been built up over centuries or millennia. Even-aged stands created after clear-cutting lack the structural complexity and network connectivity of old-growth forests and function fundamentally differently. The recovery of a forest to old-growth status following logging is possible but difficult. The mycelial networks must re-establish. The fungal connections must be reformed. The cooperative relationships must develop. The structural diversity must accumulate through the slow growth of trees of different ages. This process requires centuries to millennia, a timescale far exceeding the human planning horizons of most land management decisions. Understanding the forest as a networked system also changes our understanding of individual trees. An old-growth redwood is not simply an individual, but rather a hub in a network, a fountain of resources, a transmitter of signals, a node of tremendous significance. Its loss is not simply the loss of that individual, but the disruption of the network as a whole. This understanding makes the protection of old-growth forests a priority, as these ancient trees are the living infrastructure that holds the network together. The forest, understood as a networked system, is also more vulnerable to certain types of damage. An interconnected network is only as strong as its most critical connections. The loss of key hub trees, the creation of barriers that prevent network communication, the disruption of mycorrhizal associations through soil disturbance or chemical pollution, all these impacts can affect the health and function of the entire network. But an interconnected network is also more resilient in other ways. The redundancy created by multiple pathways allows resources to flow around obstacles. The assistance provided by the network to stressed individuals allows the survival of trees that would otherwise perish. The early warning system created by chemical signaling through the network allows coordinated defense against pests and diseases. This concept of forest networks of trees as parts of larger wholes may be the key to understanding both the fragility and the resilience of redwood forests. Fragile in their dependence on the complex network relationships that take centuries to establish. Resilient in their interconnection, their ability to share resources and support stressed individuals, their redundancy and adaptive capacity. Imagine the forest below the soil, a vast fungal network connecting thousands of trees, resources flowing in multiple directions, signals traveling instantaneously through the mycelial threads, the forest operating as a unified entity, despite the apparent independence of individual trees above ground. Segment 13. Conservation, Protection, and Human Responsibility. The redwood forests of the Pacific Coast represent one of Earth's most significant ecosystems, yet they have faced unprecedented threats in recent centuries. The protection of redwood forests began in earnest only in the late 19th and 20th centuries, after the majority of the original old-growth forest had been destroyed. The early conservation movement, led by figures like John Muir, recognized the unique value of the redwood forests and began a campaign to protect them from further logging. Redwood forests are protected by federal, state, and local parks. The establishment of protected areas has been crucial to the survival of old-growth redwood forests. Redwood National Park, established in 1968, protects over 130,000 acres of redwood forest, including some of the tallest trees on Earth. California state parks protect additional thousands of acres. Private conservation organizations have purchased land and placed it under permanent protection. The result is a network of protected areas that, while not encompassing all of the remaining old-growth forest, does provide protection for significant portions. Yet protection is not absolute or guaranteed. Political pressures for logging continue. Budget constraints limit the ability of agencies to manage protected lands effectively. Climate change poses novel threats that current management strategies may not address. The protection of these forests requires constant vigilance and continued political commitment. The forests are a symbol of conservation and environmental protection. The campaign to save the redwoods has become synonymous with the broader environmental movement. The iconic image of a massive redwood tree dwarfing an automobile or a human figure has been used repeatedly to symbolize the power of nature and the importance of conservation. Many people's first encounter with the concept of conservation, with the idea that nature deserves protection for its own sake, comes through the story of the redwoods. The conservation of redwood forests requires an understanding of the complex ecological processes that maintain them. Management decisions must account for the role of fire in forest ecology, the importance of old-growth structure, the need for connectivity between protected areas. Management must also account for the needs of dependent species, ensuring that conservation efforts actually succeed in preventing extinction. Climate change poses new challenges to redwood conservation. While redwood forests have survived climate change in the past, the rate of contemporary climate change is unprecedented. The shifting of climate zones northward and upward in elevation might compress the suitable habitat for redwoods. Changes in precipitation patterns might affect the fog that provides crucial water supply. Changes in fire regimes might alter the disturbance dynamics to which redwoods have adapted. Yet redwood forests may be among the most resilient forests to climate change. The long lifespan of individual redwoods means that a tree can persist for centuries, even if conditions gradually shift away from its optimal range. The genetic diversity within redwood populations and across the broader geographic range may provide some capacity for evolutionary response to changing conditions. The geographic range of redwoods, stretching over several hundred miles, means that populations in different locations experience different climate conditions, allowing some degree of adaptation as conditions shift. The protection and restoration of redwood forests is an investment in the future. Forest protection provides multiple benefits beyond the preservation of the individual forest. Protected forests provide habitat for dependent species, many facing extinction. They provide recreational opportunities for humans, contributing to physical and mental health. They sequester carbon, helping to mitigate climate change. They filter water, maintaining water quality for downstream communities. They inspire wonder and awe, contributing to human spiritual and aesthetic well-being. They provide material for scientific research, advancing human knowledge about ecology and evolution. The economic value of protected forests is substantial. The timber value of old-growth forest is often cited as the primary economic benefit of logging. But the economic value of protected forests, when accounting for all ecosystem services, wildlife habitat, water purification, carbon sequestration, recreation, and existence value exceeds the timber value. The loss of a forest reduces the economic value of the region. The forests are a source of inspiration for conservation and environmental protection. Each new generation that encounters the redwoods experiences the transformative impact of standing before these ancient giants. Many of these people become advocates for protection. Scientists studying the forests contribute to understanding that informs conservation policy. Artists create works inspired by the forests that inspire others. The redwood forest, in its way, is its own best advocate, silently persuading those who encounter it of the value of protection. The challenge of conservation is to balance protection with the legitimate needs and desires of human communities. Logging has historically been an important part of the regional economy. Workers dependent on the timber industry faced uncertainty and hardship when restrictions on logging were implemented. Conservation is sometimes perceived as hostile to human interests, an imposition of values from outside the local community. Yet new economic models have emerged that demonstrate that forests can provide more economic value when left standing than when logged. Ecotourism, recreation, and the sale of ecosystem services create economic benefits that can exceed timber value. Community-based management approaches involve local stakeholders in decision-making, building broader support for conservation. The transition from extraction-based economies to value-added and service-based economies has occurred in many regions, showing that economic prosperity does not necessarily depend on logging. The protection of redwood forests is a long-term commitment, one that extends beyond human lifetimes and requires institutions that can persist across generations. The creation of permanent protected status, the establishment of endowments to fund management in perpetuity, the development of legal frameworks that transcend short-term political cycles. These represent the kind of long-term thinking that conservation requires. In essence, the protection of redwood forests is an expression of humility, a recognition that some things are more valuable than economic gain, that we have obligations to other species and to future generations, that our role is to be stewards rather than masters of the natural world. Imagine future generations standing in these forests, experiencing the same awe and wonder that we experience, encountering living trees that were ancient before our birth, forests that will persist long after our death. This is what conservation makes possible. Segment 14: Scientific Wonder and Continuous Discovery. The redwood forest continues to be a source of scientific fascination and discovery. The simple act of measuring the tallest trees has led to remarkable findings. The tallest known redwood, a tree named Hyperion, stands approximately 379 feet tall, just slightly shorter than the recently confirmed record holder. The discovery of these superlative trees, one of which was unknown to science until recently, demonstrates that major discoveries continue to be made even in well-studied areas. The study of redwood forest canopies has revealed ecosystems of extraordinary complexity. The canopy community, with its soil mats, specialized plants, and endemic animals, represents an entirely different world from the forest floor. Understanding how these canopies form, how they function, and how they respond to environmental change requires specialized research techniques, including the use of climbing equipment, access platforms, and remote sensing technology. Scientists are still making discoveries in the redwood canopy, finding new species, understanding new ecological relationships. The mycorrhizal networks of the forest represent another frontier of discovery. Decades of research have revealed the structure of these networks, the mechanisms of signaling and resource transfer, the role of networks in forest health and resilience. Yet many questions remain unanswered. The study of these networks requires techniques from mycology, molecular biology, plant physiology, and ecology, representing an interdisciplinary frontier of science. The history of the redwood forest, recorded in tree rings and preserved in peat bogs and other sediments, can be read by scientists using techniques of dendrochronology and palynology. The study of tree rings allows reconstruction of past climates and disturbance regimes. The study of pollen in sediment layers allows reconstruction of past forest composition and vegetation changes. Through these techniques, scientists can read a 1,000-year history of the forest, understanding how it has changed and adapted to past environmental variability. The biochemistry of redwood wood and bark, including the specific compounds that provide protection from rot, fire, and insects, remains an active area of research. Understanding these compounds might lead to new materials, new medications, or new understanding of how plants solve fundamental problems of survival. The complexity of plant chemistry is vast, and the redwood is still revealing new compounds and new relationships. The genetics of redwoods, including the mechanisms that allow for extreme longevity, remain imperfectly understood. Why do some redwoods live for 2,000 years while most other tree species live for much shorter periods? What genetic and physiological mechanisms enable such extreme longevity? Research is beginning to reveal some answers, but many questions remain. The study of redwood genetics might reveal principles of aging and longevity applicable to other organisms, including humans. The climate dynamics of redwood forests, including the feedback loops through which trees influence local climate and the mechanisms by which forests respond to climate change, represent another area of active research. How do terpene emissions from redwoods influence cloud formation? How sensitive are redwoods to changes in fog frequency and intensity? How will the geographic range of redwoods shift as climate warms? These questions are actively being investigated by climate scientists and forest ecologists. The role of redwood forests in the global carbon cycle remains an area of significance and ongoing research. The total amount of carbon stored in redwood forests is staggering, representing a substantial fraction of the carbon stored in all forests worldwide. Understanding how this carbon is sequestered, how it is maintained over long periods, and how it might be affected by climate change or forest management decisions is important for both climate science and conservation. The restoration ecology of redwood forests represents another frontier. How can degraded redwood forest habitat be restored? Can logged areas ever return to old growth status, and if so, on what timescale? What techniques are most effective in assisting forest recovery? These practical questions of restoration drive active research programs aimed at recovering damaged forests and expanding protected forest area. The human dimensions of redwood forest conservation, including the cultural values of indigenous peoples, the economic impacts of conservation on local communities, and the psychological and spiritual impacts of forests on human well-being, represent another set of questions driving research in the social sciences and humanities. Understanding humans' relationship with the redwood forest is essential to the long-term success of conservation efforts. The redwood forest, despite centuries of scientific study, continues to yield new discoveries. New species continue to be discovered. New ecological relationships continue to be revealed. New questions continue to emerge as knowledge advances. The forest is simultaneously becoming better understood and revealing itself to be even more complex and remarkable than previously appreciated. This continuous discovery suggests that our understanding of the redwood forest will never be complete, that there will always be new mysteries to investigate, new questions to ask, new reasons to protect and study these remarkable ecosystems. Scientists working in redwood forests often speak of a sense of privilege, of being allowed to study systems of such profound complexity and beauty. The forests reward investigation with discovery and provide inspiration for deeper thinking about fundamental questions of ecology, evolution, and the relationship between humans and nature. Imagine the forests continuing into the future, still revealing secrets, still providing inspiration, still teaching us about the possibilities of persistence, resilience, and interconnection in the natural world. Segment 15. Final Reflections and Eternal Forest. We have journeyed together through the world of the redwood forest, from the ancient giants reaching toward the sky to the smallest organisms living in a single grain of soil. We have explored the canopy world hundreds of feet above the ground and descended to the forest floor, where the work of decay and renewal continues. We have learned of networks connecting trees through fungal threads and root grafts, of strategies of reproduction, both sexual and asexual, of adaptations refined through millions of years of evolution. We have considered the cultural and spiritual significance of these forests, their role in human consciousness and identity. Yet for all the knowledge we have acquired, the redwood forest retains a quality of mystery, a sense of something deeper than what science can measure or describe. To stand before a tree 2,000 years old, to place one's hand on bark that has remained unchanged for centuries, to breathe air that has been filtered through the canopy for generations, to sense the presence of thousands of species living interdependent lives, is to encounter something that transcends rational comprehension. The quiet life of the forest is a sanctuary for reflection and connection. The forest seems to exist outside of ordinary time, moving at a pace so different from the human experience that it creates a sense of timelessness. In the forest, the concerns that dominate human consciousness, the accumulation of possessions, the achievement of status, the measurement of productivity in units of time, seem insignificant. The forest offers a different scale of value, where the important things are connection, continuation, resilience, the slow accumulation of growth. The forests are a haven for meditation and mindfulness. The qualities of the forest, The constancy, the balance, the interconnection are the same qualities that contemplative practices attempt to cultivate in human consciousness. To meditate in the forest is to align oneself with the natural rhythms and values of the ecosystem. The forest becomes a teacher, instructing through its example about how to live well, how to persist through difficulty, how to maintain connection with others. The forest's soothing environment is perfect for restful sleep. As you rest within the forest's embrace, surrounded by its sounds and scents, sheltered by its presence, your body relaxes into recovery. Sleep comes naturally in the forest, deep and restorative, interrupted by the sounds of life continuing through the night. Dreams in the forest are often of a profundity missing from dreams in urban environments. The subconscious mind, freed from the constant demands of processing human-made stimuli, seems to access deeper layers of awareness. The forest's natural ambience is ideal for unwinding and letting go of stress. The longer one remains in the forest, the more one feels the accumulated stress of human civilization beginning to dissolve. The constant vigilance required in human environments gradually decreases. The body's stress response systems, held in a state of elevated readiness by urban environments, begin to downregulate. The result is a felt sense of peace, of safety, of coming home to a place where one belongs. The gentle rhythms and cycles of the forest promote a sense of peace and well-being. The forest operates according to rules different from those of human society. There is no rush, no competition, no judgment. Each organism has its place, its role. The predator that feeds on the herbivore is not cruel, nor is the herbivore a victim. The tree that falls and becomes a nurse log is not dead but transformed. Life and death are not opposites but moments in a continuous cycle. The forest's ambient textures are ideal for meditation and mindfulness. Each texture, the sponginess of moss, the roughness of bark, the delicate fronds of ferns, can become a focus for mindful attention. The act of running one's hand across different textures, of feeling the variations in the forest's tactile landscape, can anchor awareness in the present moment, freeing the mind from its tendency to dwell in the past or future. The forest's dappled light and gentle rhythms invite rest and recovery. The play of light and shadow in the forest creates an environment that neither stimulates nor depresses, but rather calms and balances. The gentle variations in light, rather than the harsh transitions of day and night in open spaces, create an environment that eases the body into rest. As your awareness deepens into the forest, as you sink more fully into the experience of being in this ancient ecosystem, your body and mind begin to merge with the forest itself. Your breath synchronizes with the gentle rhythms of air moving through the canopy. Your heartbeat aligns with the slow pulse of growth extending through the trees. Your thoughts become as quiet and spacious as the understory beneath the canopy. In this state of deep connection, the boundary between self and forest begins to dissolve. The trees are not separate from you, but extensions of your being. The soil beneath you is not separate, but the foundation supporting you. The fungi connecting tree roots might as well be connecting your consciousness to the consciousness of the forest. The network that connects trees connects you to the entire community of life. From this perspective, the destruction of the redwood forest is not merely an environmental tragedy, but a kind of self-harm, the destruction of the larger self of which individual humans are parts. The protection of the forest is not merely a moral duty, but an act of self-preservation, the preservation of the larger context within which individual human consciousness emerges and within which it finds meaning. The redwood forest will likely persist for millennia longer, adapting to climate change, recovering from disturbance, continuing its slow growth. The question is not whether the forest will survive, but whether humans will choose to preserve it, to refrain from the destruction that technology now enables, to recognize that some things are more valuable than short-term economic gain. The redwood forest offers humans a gift, the experience of time at a scale both longer and deeper than ordinary human consciousness. It offers the experience of interconnection at levels from the genetic to the mycological to the atmospheric. It offers rest, healing, restoration, perspective. It offers beauty, wonder, mystery. It offers contact with the deep past and inspiration for the future. As you drift deeper into sleep, as your consciousness begins to dissolve into dreams, let the forest be your companion. Let the ancient redwoods stand as your guardians through the night. Let their quiet presence reassure you that persistence is possible, that growth continues, that the network connecting all things holds you safe within its embrace. The forest's gentle rhythms and cycles promote a sense of harmony and balance. Harmony and balance are not states that occur at some future time, but conditions that are always present in the natural world. You are already in harmony with the forest. You are already part of the network, the ecosystem, the community of life that stretches across centuries and species. The forest does not need to teach you these things, but merely to remind you of what you have always known. As sleep approaches, as your awareness turns inward, carry with you the memory of the forest. Carry the image of the great trees, roots spreading outward, canopies extending upward, connecting beneath and above to countless other lives. Carry the scent of the forest, the sound of water dripping from mist-covered leaves, the feel of moss beneath your fingers. These memories are not separate from you, but part of you, stored in your cells and neurons, part of the neural networks that make you conscious. The forest is always present, always available, a sanctuary you can return to in memory or in person. The forest persists, the trees continue to grow, the network continues to pulse with life and communication. The great cycle of growth and decay continues. The forest is eternal, or at least eternal in the only way that matters. It will persist beyond individual human lives, continuing to offer its gifts to future generations, standing as a testament to persistence, resilience, interconnection, and the extraordinary achievement of life on Earth. And now, as sleep finally claims your consciousness, as you drift into the realm of dreams, the forest remains. In your dreams, you might walk among the redwoods. You might climb into the canopy and observe the life there. You might travel through the root network beneath the soil. You might become a part of the forest, indistinguishable from the trees and soil and fungi and countless other lives sharing space in this ancient ecosystem. In sleep, the boundaries between dreamer and dream dissolve. You are the forest, and the forest is you. The great redwoods tower above in your awareness. The network beneath the soil holds you safe. The canopy provides shelter and rest. The gentle cycles of growth and renewal continue without end. Sleep well, knowing that the forest is always there, always growing, always persisting, always offering its gifts to those who are open to receive them. The silent life of the redwood forest continues through the night, through the seasons, through the centuries, a quiet testament to the power of nature, the possibility of persistence, and the profound value of connection. May your sleep be deep and restful. May your dreams be peaceful and restorative. May you awaken refreshed, carrying with you the memory of the ancient forest, knowing that it stands as a refuge, a sanctuary, a home for all who seek peace and connection with the natural world. The redwood forest awaits, now and always, silent and eternal, a living monument to time, resilience, and the beauty of the natural world. Segment 16. The water cycle and hydrological systems. The redwood forest exists in an intimate relationship with water that shapes every aspect of its existence. Water is not merely a resource consumed by the trees, but rather the central organizing principle around which the entire ecosystem revolves. The water cycle in a redwood forest is fundamentally different from the water cycle in most other terrestrial ecosystems, creating unique conditions that only redwoods and their associated species can fully exploit. The fog that develops over the Pacific Ocean travels inland, driven by atmospheric patterns that change predictably with the seasons. During summer, when inland temperatures rise, a pressure gradient develops that draws cool, moist ocean air inland. This air travels across the cold California current and picks up tremendous amounts of moisture. When this air encounters the coastal mountains and cools further, fog forms. The redwood forests occupy precisely the elevation range where this fog most reliably forms, creating a climate where fog is nearly guaranteed on most summer evenings and mornings. The mechanism of fog capture by redwood needles is not well understood despite decades of research. The needles have a particular shape and surface texture that seems optimized for water capture. The size and arrangement of the needles, their waxy coating, the way they are oriented on the branches, all these features seem designed by millions of years of evolution to maximize water capture. As fog drifts through the forest, moving slowly because of resistance from the dense canopy, water droplets collide with needles. Some of these collisions result in the droplet being captured, adhering to the needle surface through electrostatic and molecular forces. As droplets accumulate, they merge into larger droplets that become heavy enough to fall due to gravity. These droplets drip from the needles onto the foliage below, creating a continuous, gentle rain beneath the canopy. This drip reaches the understory and forest floor, saturating the moss, the leaf litter, and the soil. In effect, the tree is creating its own water recycling system, tapping into the atmospheric water at elevations where it is freely available and delivering it to the parts of the tree and forest that need it most. The importance of this fog capture becomes apparent during the dry season. From July through September, when precipitation is minimal, fog becomes the primary source of water. The redwood forest in summer fog is saturated with moisture, even though it has not rained in weeks. The streams continue to flow because of water captured from the fog. The vegetation remains hydrated, the soil remains moist. Without the fog, the summer months would be a period of severe drought, and the trees would face tremendous water stress. This dependence on fog creates a vulnerability to climate change. Should the climate shift in ways that reduce the frequency of fog or that warm the coastal air enough to prevent fog formation, the redwood forests would face existential threat. Some climate models suggest that coastal fog might become less frequent in future decades, a prospect that creates deep concern among those who study redwood forests. The adaptation that has served redwoods so well for millennia, the ability to harvest fog, might become insufficient to sustain the forest. But during normal years, the fog abundance makes the redwood forest one of the wettest places on Earth. The combination of direct precipitation and fog capture creates annual water inputs that exceed the precipitation in many tropical rainforests. The forest is constantly wet, the humidity is constantly high, and water flows continuously through the ecosystem. This abundance of water supports the lush vegetation of the forest. The ferns, the mosses, the lichens, the countless plants that live beneath and within the redwood canopy are dependent on constant moisture. Many of these plants lack the waxy coverings or other drought-resistant features of plants from drier environments. They are vulnerable to desiccation and cannot survive in drier climates. Their presence in the redwood forest is possible only because of the remarkable water abundance. The streams of the redwood forest are cold and clear, fed by springs emerging from the redwood forest soil. These streams support salmon during their spawning runs, coho salmon and steelhead trout that have spent years in the ocean returning to their natal streams to reproduce. The salmon, in dying after spawning, deposit nutrients from the ocean into the forest, a process called nutrient transport that links the marine and terrestrial ecosystems. The bodies of salmon become food for bears, eagles, and other predators, and their remains decompose to enrich the forest soil. The streams also support aquatic macroinvertebrates, insects, crustaceans, and other organisms that live in the water. The clear, cold water and stable flows of redwood forest streams are ideal habitat for many of these species. Some species are found nowhere else, having evolved in isolation in these specific streams. The presence of healthy stream ecosystems indicates the health of the redwood forest and the watersheds that feed the streams. The forest floor, saturated with water, becomes a place of continuous biological activity. Fungi spread their hyphae through soil, breaking down organic matter and releasing nutrients. Bacteria, archaea, and other microorganisms continue their essential work of decomposition and nutrient cycling. The soil fauna, including earthworms, millipedes, springtails, and countless other arthropods, work continuously to process organic matter and aerate the soil. The water percolating through the forest soil filters impurities, a process that provides tremendous ecosystem service. Water entering the redwood forest through precipitation or running off from upstream areas is filtered as it passes through layers of soil and plant material. Pathogens are removed, sediments are captured, nutrients are retained or incorporated into plant biomass. The water emerging from the forest is cleaner than the water entering it, a natural water purification system that provides value far exceeding any engineered treatment plant. In some areas, redwood forests flank streams and rivers, providing riparian buffers that protect aquatic ecosystems. The shade provided by redwood trees keeps stream water cool. The leaf litter and woody debris falling into the stream provides habitat structure and organic matter. The root systems of redwood trees stabilize banks, reducing erosion and sedimentation. The forests quite literally maintain the health of the aquatic ecosystems within and downstream of their boundaries. The redwood forest water cycle is thus not merely a forest phenomenon, but connects the forest to the ocean, to the atmosphere, to downstream aquatic ecosystems, and to human communities that depend on clean water. The loss of redwood forest affects not only the forest itself, but the entire hydrological system of which the forest is a part. Water moves through the redwood forest as it has for millennia, in the same patterns, at the same pace, sustaining the same community of organisms. The water cycle is one of the most fundamental and predictable phenomena in the forest, a reassuring constant in a changing world. Segment 17. Seasonal changes and the forest's annual cycle. Although the redwood forest is often described as unchanging and eternal, the forest experiences profound seasonal changes that structure the life of the ecosystem. Spring brings a flush of growth as increasing day length triggers the emergence of new leaves and the resumption of active growth following the relative dormancy of winter. The buds that have been tightly furled all winter swell and burst, releasing tender new foliage. This burst of growth consumes tremendous resources. The sugars stored in the wood over the winter are mobilized and moved upward to support new cell production. The roots extract water and nutrients from the soil and transport them upward to support the growing shoots. This spring growth attracts herbivores emerging from winter dormancy. Insects become active after months of inactivity. Many insect species have synchronized their life cycles with the emergence of new foliage, timing egg hatching to coincide with the appearance of the food source. The sudden abundance of insects attracts birds, both resident species and migratory species, arriving from wintering grounds. The forest becomes a place of frenetic activity, predator and prey, reproduction and feeding, growth and consumption. The birds nesting in the redwood forest in spring and summer produce eggs and chicks. The nesting season requires tremendous parental effort, with parents making dozens of foraging trips daily to provide food for growing chicks. The nestlings grow at a remarkable pace, feathering out and preparing for fledging. The energy demands of the forest ecosystem peak during this season of growth and reproduction. As spring progresses into summer, the growth of plants slows as the soil begins to dry and water becomes less abundant. The abundance of insect life continues, but the growth of new plant material slows. The canopy becomes fully leafed out, and the dense shade beneath the canopy limits the growth of shade-sensitive plants. The summer redwood forest is mature and productive, growing steadily but slowly, accumulating biomass year by year. The arrival of fog in late summer brings relief to plants beginning to experience water stress. The regular evening and morning fog becomes the most reliable water source. The rhythm of the forest adapts to fog, with water uptake occurring primarily during nighttime and early morning hours. when fog is most abundant and temperatures are cool. Autumn brings color to the redwood forest, though not the dramatic displays of deciduous forests in other regions. The light filtering through the canopy changes as the sun's angle decreases. Some plants produce fruits or seeds that attract birds and other animals, dispersing these seeds as the animals move through and away from the forest. Some plants display color changes in their foliage as chlorophyll is withdrawn and other pigments become visible. The overall palette of the autumn forest is rich but subtle, greens darkening, yellows and oranges appearing in places, the forest entering a season of preparation and withdrawal. The arrival of winter brings a period of cooler temperatures and increased precipitation. Snow rarely falls in the redwood forest except at the highest elevations, but rain becomes abundant. Temperatures drop and the water uptake and growth processes of the trees slows dramatically. Some plants enter a dormant period, closing stomata and withdrawing metabolic activity. Other plants continue to grow slowly through the winter, taking advantage of the increased moisture and mild temperatures. The winter redwood forest is not a place of death or stasis, but rather a continuation of life at a slower pace. Decomposition continues as fungi and bacteria continue their work breaking down dead material. The mycorrhizal networks continue to function, transporting nutrients and water to trees and fungi. Animals that remain active through the winter continue their activities, though many are less active and require less food. The forest's metabolism slows but does not stop. Some animals migrate, following the seasons. Birds migrate to warmer latitudes to escape winter. Salmon return to the streams, having spent their years of growth in the ocean, to spawn in the natal streams. These seasonal migrations create waves of arrival and departure, peaks and valleys in population abundance that structure the annual cycle. The redwood forest, when observed over multiple years, shows remarkable constancy in these seasonal patterns. Spring growth occurs at roughly the same time each year. The arrival of fog occurs on a predictable schedule. The migration of birds follows established patterns. This predictability allows organisms to synchronize their life cycles with the forest's seasonal rhythm. An organism that produces seeds in early summer knows that by late summer, those seeds will have time to germinate and establish before winter stress arrives. Yet the predictability is not absolute. Some years bring earlier springs and later autumns, extending the growing season. Other years bring delayed springs and early freezes, shortening the growing season. Some years bring abundant rain and others bring drought. Within the predictable framework of seasonal rhythm, there is variation, creating good years and difficult years for the various organisms dependent on the forest. The seasonal rhythm of the redwood forest has been disrupted by climate change. Springs are arriving earlier as global temperatures rise. The timing of snowmelt in mountain areas is shifting, affecting stream flow timing. Pest populations that are normally killed off by cold winters may survive milder winters, leading to outbreaks. The precise synchronization between organisms and seasons that has evolved over millions of years may be disrupted by rapid climate change. Yet the forest's great length of life and its interconnected networks may buffer it against some of the impacts of changing seasons. A tree that experiences a poor year can often survive on stored reserves. A forest where good years outweigh bad years at an overall scale can persist despite increasing variability. The network connections between trees may allow stressed individuals to receive support from neighbors. The seasonal cycle of the redwood forest is an expression of the Earth's orbital characteristics, the tilt of the axis that creates the seasons, the warming and cooling that occurs as the hemisphere's relationship to the sun changes. The forest dances to the rhythm of the planet, growth and rest, activity and dormancy, following the same pattern for millions of years and continuing for millions of years into the future. Segment 18. The sounds of the forest at night. As daylight fades and night falls over the redwood forest, the soundscape undergoes a dramatic transformation. The chorus of diurnal birds, the jays, the woodpeckers, the thrushes, falls silent as these species settle into roosts within the canopy. The forest seems to become quieter, but in fact, it is simply exchanging one soundscape for another, equally rich but different in character. The sounds of nocturnal animals emerge as darkness deepens. Owls call from the canopy, their hoots and whistles echoing through the forest. Spotted owls emit their characteristic barking call, a series of short hoots that carries through the still night air. Great horned owls produce deeper, more resonant calls. These owl calls have a function beyond simple vocalizing. They communicate ownership of territory. They establish contact between mates. They announce the presence of the caller to other owls in the area. The night forest becomes a place of long-distance communication, with messages broadcast across the landscape through sound. Small mammals stir in the leaf litter and understory. Tree voles emerge from their daytime nests to forage on lichen and fungal fruiting bodies. Mice and shrews hunt insects in the dark. The movement of these small creatures creates soft rustling sounds in the leaves and dried twigs. Sounds barely perceptible but present if one listens carefully. A trained ear can learn to distinguish the rustles of different species and infer their activities and locations. Insects too become more vocal at night. Crickets chirp, their calls serving to attract mates and to establish territories. Katydids produce their distinctive calls. The sounds of insects, produced by leg rubbing or wing vibrations, create a subtle background chorus that varies with temperature and season. Cool nights produce fewer insect sounds as the metabolic rate of insects declines with temperature. Warm nights in late summer produce a background chorus that is nearly continuous. Water continues to drip from the canopy throughout the night, though the dripping may slow compared to evening and morning when fog is heaviest. The soft patter of water droplets falling onto leaves and the forest floor creates a gentle percussion track underneath the other sounds. In areas near streams, the sound of flowing water adds another layer to the soundscape. The gurgle of a small stream, the occasional splash of water over rocks, the muffled roar of a larger stream in the distance. All these sounds create a water-based music underlying the entire forest. Wind moving through the canopy changes character at night. As the day's thermal updrafts cease and the atmosphere stabilizes, the wind becomes more gentle and variable. The wind moves through the canopy in waves, building to peaks of intensity and then subsiding. Each wave of wind produces a change in the rustling of needles and foliage. The sound is complex and interesting, but lacking the intensity of daytime winds. The redwood forest at night is a place of acoustic complexity, a rich soundscape that rewards patient listening. Rather than being silent, the night forest is filled with information conveyed through sound. The presence of owls hunting, the activity of small mammals foraging, the calls of insects seeking mates, the sounds of water moving through the ecosystem, the movement of wind through branches. Each sound carries information for organisms that can interpret it. The location of a mate, the identity of a competitor, the presence of a predator, the availability of food. For humans listening to this soundscape, the night forest provides a window into a world of perception fundamentally different from our own. Humans are visual creatures, evolved to hunt by sight during daylight. The night soundscape of the forest reveals a parallel world, one where vision is of limited utility and sound becomes the primary sense through which information about the world is conveyed. The nocturnal animals of the forest navigate this world of sound, locating prey, finding mates, avoiding predators, all through listening. The technology of echolocation used by bats transforms the night forest into a different sort of acoustic environment. Bats emit high-frequency sounds and listen to the echoes, using the reflections to detect obstacles and locate flying insects. The world perceived by a bat echolocating in the redwood forest canopy is a rich three-dimensional space, mapped in fine detail through sound reflections. A bat navigating through the complex geometry of the redwood canopy uses echolocation to detect branches and gaps, to locate flying insects, to navigate safely through the darkness. The sounds of the night forest continue through the hours of darkness. As the night deepens toward midnight and beyond, the intensity of animal sounds may diminish as animals settle into rest or focus on specific activities. But the background sounds continue. The drip of water, the wind in their canopy, the rustle of nocturnal creatures in the leaf litter, the calls of owls continuing their territorial displays and mate-finding activities. Toward dawn, the soundscape begins to shift again. The nocturnal animals begin to quiet, settling back into daytime resting places. The diurnal animals begin to stir, waking and becoming active. There is often a period of brief overlap, a time when both nocturnal and diurnal species are active and vocalizing. This dawn chorus, with its mixture of night-lingering sounds and newly emerged diurnal sounds, creates a complex and beautiful acoustic landscape. The sounds of the redwood forest at night are sounds of life, diversity, and continuous activity. They are sounds of a world that does not rest even when humans rest, that continues its work of predation and feeding, reproduction and competition, growth and decay through the hours of darkness. To listen to these sounds is to gain a glimpse into the reality of the forest as a living entity, always active, always engaged with itself and its inhabitants, never truly still or silent. Segment 19. Human encounters with the ancient forest. Throughout human history, people encountering the redwood forest for the first time have reported experiences of profound emotional impact. The scale of the trees, the age implicit in their size and structure, the undeniable sense of encountering something far larger and older than oneself creates a psychological and emotional response that transcends intellectual understanding. For the Native American peoples who lived in the redwood forests for thousands of years, the redwoods were more than merely impressive trees. They were part of a spiritual landscape woven into mythology and cultural practice. The wood of redwoods was used for building structures that could last for centuries. The bark was used to create clothing and basketry. The trees provided shelter and resources that allowed human communities to thrive. The relationship between people and forest was intimate and ancient, extending back further than recorded history. When European explorers first encountered the redwood forests in the 1800s, the responses were often expressions of awe and wonder. Journals and letters described trees that seemed impossibly tall, that were difficult to comprehend, even when standing directly before them. Photographers developed techniques specifically designed to emphasize the scale of the trees by including human figures in images. Paintings attempted to capture the majesty and solemnity of the forest. The logging industry that developed in the 19th and 20th centuries viewed the redwood forest differently. As a resource, a source of timber that could be converted to profit. The trees that some perceived as sacred were perceived by others as commodities. The conflict between these worldviews, between the desire to preserve the forest and the desire to harvest it for economic gain, has defined much of the modern history of the redwood forest. The conservation movement emerged as a reaction to the rapid logging of old-growth redwood forests. In the early 20th century, preservationists like John Muir and the Sierra Club began advocating for protection of the redwoods. Their arguments emphasized the irreplaceable nature of the ancient forests, their value to human recreation and spiritual renewal, their role in the broader ecosystem. These advocates succeeded in establishing some of the earliest protected areas, but not before the vast majority of the original old-growth forest had been logged. The preservation efforts continued through the 20th century. Redwood National Park was established in 1968, protecting some of the tallest remaining trees and some of the largest remaining old-growth redwood forest. State parks supplemented the protection provided by the national park. Private conservation organizations purchased land and placed it under permanent protection. The result was a patchwork of protected areas that, while representing a significant achievement, still left much of the remaining redwood forest unprotected or inadequately protected. The experience of visiting a preserved redwood forest has become transformative for millions of people. Visitors to redwood forests report feeling small and insignificant in the best possible way, their human concerns shrinking in perspective when confronted with trees that have existed for thousands of years. Many visitors report feeling a spiritual connection or sense of peace in the forest. Some report that time seems to move differently in the forest, that hours can pass feeling like minutes, or that days in the forest feel like a retreat outside of normal temporal experience. The psychological research on human responses to forests, and particularly to old-growth forests, suggests that these subjective experiences have a basis in measurable physiological changes. Time spent in forests is associated with decreased cortisol, a stress hormone. Forest exposure is associated with improved mood and decreased anxiety. The visual complexity of the forest, with its many levels of structure and variety of forms and colors, provides stimulation that is sufficient to engage attention, but not so intense as to create stress. This state, termed fascination in the psychological literature, creates a particular quality of attention that is both restful and engaged. The concept of forest bathing, or Shinrin-yoku, developed in Japan, represents a formalization of the intuitive understanding that time spent in forests has health benefits. Forest bathing is not exercise or a goal-oriented activity, but rather a mindful immersion in the forest environment with attention given to sensory experiences, the scents, the sounds, the tactile sensations, the visual landscape. The practice is increasingly recognized by researchers as providing measurable benefits to human health and well-being. For many modern people, the redwood forest represents one of the last remnants of wild nature, a place where the human hand is largely invisible, where natural processes continue relatively undisturbed. In an era where human influence has transformed nearly every terrestrial ecosystem, where wild places have become rare and fragmented, the redwood forest offers something precious: the experience of being in a landscape shaped primarily by natural forces rather than human design. Segment 20: Eternal Vigilance and the Future of the Forest. As we conclude this journey through the redwood forest, it is important to recognize that the future of these ancient ecosystems is not assured. While the forests have survived millions of years of natural change, they face unprecedented threats in the modern era. These threats emerge from human activities: logging, climate change, air pollution, habitat fragmentation, and species invasion, among others. The threat of logging remains the most immediate and direct threat to old-growth redwood forests. While the most egregious logging has been halted through legal protections, timber harvesting continues on unprotected private lands and in some public lands. The economic pressure for logging remains strong, and political opposition to protection has not disappeared. Maintaining current protections and expanding protected areas requires constant vigilance and political commitment. Climate change presents a novel and potentially existential threat to redwood forests. The redwoods have adapted to specific climate conditions: cool summers, mild winters, abundant fog. Projections for future climate suggest shifts in all these parameters. Temperatures are expected to increase. The frequency and intensity of fog may decrease. Precipitation patterns may shift. Some models suggest that the suitable range for redwoods may contract northward and upward in elevation, potentially shrinking the geographic range available to these trees. The response of redwood forests to these climate changes is uncertain. The great age and slow growth of redwoods means they cannot quickly relocate or adapt to changing conditions. A tree that has grown for 2,000 years cannot suddenly move to a cooler location or adjust its water needs if the fog supply decreases. The forest's only option for adaptation is through slow evolutionary change, natural selection acting on genetic variation, favoring individuals that tolerate the new conditions. But evolutionary adaptation requires generations and may not be fast enough to match the pace of climate change. Invasive species represent another emerging threat. Non-native plants can sometimes outcompete native species, altering the structure and function of the forest. Non-native insects and diseases can attack redwoods or the species on which they depend. The geographic isolation of redwood forests has protected them historically, but global trade and travel have made invasion easier. A single infected tree or plant brought from elsewhere could introduce a pathogen with potential to devastate the forest. Air pollution, whether from local sources or long-distance transport, can affect the health of redwood forests. Ozone, one of the most significant air pollutants, damages the foliage of trees, reducing photosynthetic capacity. Acidic deposition can alter soil chemistry. Nitrogen deposition can shift competitive balances among plants. These impacts are often subtle and difficult to detect, but they can have significant effects on forest health over time. Forest fragmentation, the division of forests into smaller, isolated patches by human development, reduces the functionality of the forest ecosystem. Species that require large territories find their habitat fragmented. Gene flow between populations is reduced. The ability of the forest to maintain genetic diversity and adapt to change is compromised. Even if existing protected forests are preserved, their fragmentation from other forest patches can reduce their resilience and long-term viability. Yet the future is not determined. The choices made by human societies in the coming decades will significantly influence the fate of redwood forests. If protective measures are maintained and expanded, if climate change is mitigated through reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, if invasive species are prevented or controlled, if fragmentation is reduced through restoration and connectivity, then the redwood forests have a reasonable chance of persisting. The preservation of redwood forests requires different types of effort. Legal protection through the establishment of protected areas and the enforcement of regulations governing timber harvest is essential. Scientific research to understand forest ecology and the impacts of environmental change informs management decisions. Education to build public support for protection and to create cultural values that recognize the importance of forests is crucial. Economic mechanisms that reward forest conservation, whether through ecosystem service payments, conservation easements, or other approaches, can support protection even when economic pressures favor exploitation. International cooperation can play a role in addressing climate change, the most significant global threat to redwood forests. Reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, the transition to renewable energy, the preservation of forests globally as carbon sinks all contribute to mitigating climate change. The fate of redwood forests is ultimately bound up with the fate of the entire climate system and the choices humanity makes about energy and development. The redwood forest is also an opportunity for humans to rethink their relationship with nature. The existence of these ancient, interconnected, resilient forests suggests that value exists beyond economic extraction. The forests suggest that humans are capable of restraint, of choosing preservation over exploitation when they recognize that something is of irreplaceable value. The conservation of redwood forests, then, is not merely an environmental issue, but a statement about human values and our vision for our relationship with the natural world. The redwood forest stands as an invitation and a challenge. The invitation is to experience nature's majesty, to find peace and restoration in the presence of ancient life, to remember that humans are part of the natural world rather than separate from it. The challenge is to recognize the value of preservation, to advocate for protection, to make choices that honor the irreplaceable nature of these ecosystems. In the end, the redwood forest teaches that persistence is possible, that growth can continue for millennia, that interconnection creates strength, that cycles of decay and renewal sustain life. These lessons are not merely about forests, but about life itself, about what it means to endure, to grow, to belong to something larger than oneself. Sleep now, knowing that the forest persists, that its future remains to be written, that the choices of humans will determine whether these ancient giants continue to stand. Sleep in the shelter of their protection, real and metaphorical, and may you awaken with renewed commitment to the preservation of these extraordinary ecosystems. The redwood forest waits, ancient and eternal, a sanctuary of life and a mirror reflecting our own deepest values back to us. May it remain, for this generation and for countless generations to come, a place of peace, wonder, and connection with the natural world.